I thought I'd spend Christmas Eve alone, until my neighbor showed up at my door. The knock came just as I was about to turn off the last light in my apartment. It wasn't loud or desperate. It was gentle, almost hesitant, as if whoever stood outside wasn't sure they should be there at all. I remember staring at the door, wondering who would visit a man who hadn't received a Christmas card in 3 years. I had already accepted that Christmas Eve would end the same way the last few had, with silence, cold leftovers, and memories that hurt more than loneliness ever could. I had no idea that opening that door would quietly change the direction of my life forever. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still matters, if you believe hope can return even after heartbreak, and if you believe in forgiveness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us all that humanity is still alive. My name is Nathan. I lived in a small apartment building outside Burlington, Vermont, where winters seemed to last forever, and every snowfall reminded me of the Christmases I used to celebrate with my parents. They had both passed away within 18 months of each other, and after losing them, I slowly drifted away from friends, family gatherings, and even church. Grief has a strange way of convincing you that isolation is easier than facing the empty chair at the dinner table. So every December, I buried myself in work until the holidays arrived. Then I simply waited for them to pass. That Christmas Eve, the building was unusually quiet. Families had already traveled to relatives. Children laughed somewhere outside as they built snowmen, and Christmas lights blinked across the neighborhood like tiny reminders that everyone belonged somewhere except me. I heated a frozen meal, watched the snow fall beyond the window, and told myself tomorrow would just be another day. Then came that knock. When I opened the door, I found my neighbor Grace standing in the hallway with a warm smile that somehow made the cold disappear. She held a casserole dish covered with foil in one hand and a dark winter coat over her other arm. I knew Grace only in passing. She had moved into the building 6 months earlier after accepting a nursing position at the local hospital. We exchanged polite greetings in the hallway, occasionally carried groceries for one another, but nothing more. She looked at me for a long moment before quietly admitting that she had noticed my apartment had been unusually quiet since she moved in. Every holiday decoration in the building seemed to skip my door. She said she wasn't trying to intrude, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that no one should spend Christmas Eve completely alone. At first, pride almost made me thank her and close the door. Loneliness becomes familiar. After enough years, it even convinces you that accepting kindness is a burden to others. But something in her gentle expression reminded me of my mother's warmth, the way she never allowed anyone to feel forgotten. I stepped aside and Grace walked in. The apartment suddenly felt different. She uncovered homemade turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh rolls, and pumpkin pie. The rich aroma replaced the stale emptiness that had lingered in every room. She explained that she had cooked too much for herself after her hospital shift ended early, though I suspected she had planned this long before knocking. As the evening unfolded, stories slowly replaced silence. Grace spoke about growing up in Ohio with a large family that welcomed strangers every Christmas. She admitted that after losing her husband to illness several years earlier, she promised herself she would never let grief turn her heart into a closed door. Instead, every Christmas she looked for someone who might need company. More than presents, her honesty reached places inside me that I had carefully locked away. For the first time in years, I spoke openly about my parents, about how guilty I felt for moving away before they became ill, and about the countless Christmases I had spent replaying every regret instead of remembering every blessing. Grace never interrupted. She simply listened with a kind of attention that makes another person's pain feel lighter, without a single promise to fix it. Snow continued falling outside while laughter slowly found its way back into my apartment. We watched old Christmas movies, decorated the tiny artificial tree I had never bothered to unpack completely, and even sang quietly to songs playing on the radio. Somewhere between the music and the shared memories, I realized I had smiled more that evening than I had during the previous 3 years combined. The greatest surprise came just before midnight, when another knock echoed through the hallway. Several neighbors stood outside holding cookies, hot chocolate, and wrapped gifts. Grace had quietly invited them earlier that afternoon, after mentioning she wanted everyone in the building to know each other better. What began as one unexpected visit became an entire apartment, gathering filled with stories, prayers, laughter, and people who were strangers only hours before. That night taught me something I had forgotten after years of grief. Healing rarely arrives with grand miracles. Sometimes it comes disguised as a casserole dish, a patient listener, or a neighbor willing to knock on a lonely door. Over the following months, life slowly changed. I started attending community dinners, volunteered at the local food pantry with Grace, and rebuilt friendships I had neglected. Every December afterward, we continued the tradition together, visiting anyone in town who might otherwise spend Christmas alone. The circle of kindness grew larger every year, proving that compassion multiplies whenever someone chooses to share it instead of keeping it for themselves. If this story has touched your heart, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who may need a reminder that hope often arrives when we least expect it. Before this story ends, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment and tell us about a moment when someone's unexpected kindness changed your life, or how you hope to brighten someone else's holiday this year. As I locked my apartment door after everyone finally went home that Christmas morning, I looked at the small tree glowing in the corner and realized something profound. I had spent years believing that loneliness was my future, but all it took was one neighbor brave enough to knock on a forgotten door, to remind me that home is not always where your family begins. Sometimes, home is where someone chooses to make room for you, especially when you believe you've been forgotten. And that Christmas, I discovered that the greatest gift wasn't waiting beneath a tree. It was discovering that even the loneliest heart can find its way back to hope when kindness arrives. Quietly, on the other side of a simple knock.